Welcome back, everyone. I'm Matt, and this is Flatland Relics. Real quick, my neighbor made me a plaque that says Matt's Garage, established 2021, and I'm going to take a moment to hang that plaque. Thanks, Nick and family. I appreciate the plaque for the shop. It's really nice. And in the rest of this video, I am focusing on some bolt-on components for the 318, get the alternator on that engine, and get the starter on that engine also. I also have to drill out the old broken off oil dipstick tube and get that out of the block. So that's also in this video. You can see here, I already have the distributor in. Just messing with it here, pop the cap off. Set the rotor to the number 1 piston. It's pretty easy to figure out. And then just throw the cap on. That's actually difficult to do one-handed. So you can see I had to put the camera down. Excuse me. So I had to figure out some necessary bolts for this alternator. Had to figure out how the brackets go. Basically, these copy the OEM brackets. They're just chrome aftermarket ones. They bolt right to the timing cover, and that big arm sways out underneath. Those are the bolts that go into the timing cover. They're different lengths, so make sure you put them back in the right spot. And then I had to get a couple different size bolts for the one that goes into the head. Also, with the alternator, you'll see I have a section where I have to cut some spacers. When you get the aftermarket brackets, they come with a spacer tube, but you have to trim it to size. Excuse me. I do cut it with a grinder. That's what I had. Looking back, a bandsaw would have been a lot better. Even a hacksaw would have been a lot better. But I just nicked it with a grinder and filed it down smooth, and it looked pretty good. Here I got 2 different size bolts, a bunch of washers in case I had to pack them out a little bit. Wasn't exactly sure what I needed. It's hard to get like perfect numbers when you're just holding the alternator up and the bracket and trying to get a tape measure in there. So, never hurts to buy a couple options and then just use the one you need. I had filmed this a while before I edited it, and I cannot remember if that's a 5.5-inch bolt or a 5-inch bolt. I think it's a 5.5. That small bolt is the one I just took out of the alternator. That goes through the long boomerang-looking bracket into the alternator, and it's like a tensioner bolt for when you have the actual belt on. Of course, I dropped all the washers, had to pick them all up. That's standard practice around my shop. And you can see the gold bolt, the anodized bolt there goes through the double holes. They're like brackets built into the alternator casing, and then, that tensioner bolt goes into the housing, into like a threaded hole in the housing. As you can see here, the pulleys are not perfectly in line, so I will need to cut some custom length spacers from the piece that came with the alternator bracket. Here I'm just using a regular framing square to get my belts to line up good. It can hit the center of all three pulleys, which is nice. It shows you exactly where you need to be. Don't mind the dogs in the background. They're stuck inside while I record my voiceover because it's pouring outside. So, too bad for them. I took a stack of washers and used 4 or 5 of them to get my distance before I cut the chrome spacer tube. Looks like it has to come out a little bit more. I knew I wasn't going to get that right on the first measurement, so I just, like I said, I used the washers as like a mock-up distance first. Then I was able to measure that and then just cut the chrome piece once and make that happen. Looking back, there are definitely better ways to cut that chrome spacer. It's just, I don't know, the grinder's like the messiest way to do it. But it's what I had, so it's what I used. I had to file it all down smooth. The grinder leaves a lot of mess and a lot of like extra cut slag kind of hanging off the side there. So, yeah, if I had a bandsaw, that probably would have been better. If you go deep into the ham and read the articles from years ago about building cars, there's dudes on there that sit there and argue about how to use a file in your hand. And I'm sure some of them are right and some of them are wrong, but those arguments are hilarious. I've read a bunch of them trying to look up stuff about, camber or caster on a straight axle, and and the page just ends up turning into an argument over who knows how to use a hand file. So I'm sure I'm doing something wrong here, but hey, I got the metal knocked down to where I liked it, so I'm happy. This particular spacer is to hold the alternator bracket off of the head, and it's like a sleeve, so it'll go over the anodized bolt you see there, that grade 8 bolt that I got the alternator bolted to the head with. So just clean it up a little bit, doesn't need to have a bunch of burrs on it. And then we'll take it apart again and get that spacer on. I did have a little bit of trouble trying to line all this up. The bolt goes through like 4 or 5 different things before it gets to the threaded hole inside the head there, and it's actually difficult to line up when you can't see it. Once you put the spacer on, you're kind of blind with the tip of the bolt. So it was a little harder than I thought to get that together, but I did get it. The starter fit pretty good, right behind the steering box. I'm pretty sure I measured all that stuff out before I put the steering box on. So it did go in. It has to go in from underneath because it is a pretty tight fit. And the only problem I really have with that is I had to kind of bolt it together once, and then I could see it wasn't seated correctly. So I had to undo the bolts and tighten them in the other sequence, do the bottom one first and then the top one, or vice versa. I can't quite remember exactly what I had to switch, but I did I think the bottom bolt first, and it put it on there pretty good. You see my flywheel's getting a little rusty. I did not use any shims on the starter. I just put it on there tight, and we'll see what happens when I hit it with a little power. Upon doing that, I did notice that the universal joint here for the steering needed a little paint. It was starting to get a lot of surface rust, so I just gave it a quick scuff sand, got all the rust off, and here I'm wiping it down with a chemical before you paint, like a grease remover, and then dry it off, and then I just hit it with a little spray paint, just, try and keep it nice, keep stuff from rusting. Time and moisture are always against us when we're working in car stuff. A little paint can go a long way. Keep parts from rusting, keep them from getting prematurely damaged before we're even driving this car. So here you can see I'm going to start drilling out the broken off tube for the oil dipstick. I had to call the old fat guy for this one, and he got me out of a jam on this one. Thanks, Floyd. I owe you for that. So basically, I'm just going to drill this out and increase the bit size until either enough of that little tube is gone or it just grabs it, and then I can take it out. So I'm just gently running a bit down. I'm starting small on purpose, and I know don't try and put 6 inches of drill bit down into the block. Don't go crazy. And this has to get done. So it just, there's no better time than now. I still have braking oil in the engine, so that's going to get drained anyway, and any little metal shavings that did fall, they'll go out with that. If you're doing something like this, you kind of want to just use your head, You can't be a bully in there. You can't go crazy in there. Just take it easy and work it out little by little. Here's the new dipstick and the tube. It's trying to see like what it looks like, and hopefully it's the same style one that's in there, so I have an idea of how much of the bit needs to go in there. You know, kind of flying blind a little bit on this one, but just being patient. So, and yeah, I was a little nervous at first, but like I said, I called an older, better mechanic to discuss this, and he kind of just told me, just let her rip, you know, you got to get in there and get that out. So there wasn't enough left to get like vice grips on and hammer it out. I tried a couple other ways before the drill and kind of felt like this was really the only way to do this. I'm not a huge fan of drilling metal that's sitting in a built block, but what are you going to do, you know? If you've ever dealt with something like this and you have a way to handle that you think is better, you know, drop it in the comments. Let's discuss. I'm always up for good ideas. And as you can see, I got lucky with that, and it just grabbed the little piece tube out and just it bit it and pulled it out, which was perfect. Here I'm just vacuuming metal out, you know, trying to keep this as clean as possible and keep, you know, clean operation, get the little metal pieces out. Like I said, I wasn't going crazy with the drill and just running it. And then here I'm trying to pick up any little chunks of metal. I think I did get a couple out of there. You can see there's a couple little pieces on there. So just getting that out of there, trying to keep it as clean as possible. Just tapping this in with a rubber mallet, and eventually I put a block on top of it because the tube was actually cutting into the mallet pretty good. I don't get the tube seated all the way. Seems like it just kind of went as far as it was going to go without having to really hit it really hard. I'm not really trying to do that. I just, you know, I got it seated about, I don't know, a little more than 3/4 of the way. So I'll have to trim down the tube there. That way I know my dipstick hits at the right spot. But after a test run, I got it to work. And it seems to go in pretty good. Doesn't really seem to get too hung up on anything.
no fallout.
So that was just bolting the carb on. I had to go get my little tiny bag of carb wrenches and pull out the smallest wrench I think I ever used to set those studs in tight. I don't hook up any of the fuel lines or the choke or anything right now. This is just getting bolted on. I think I just wanted to look at it on the actual engine. I'm not really ready for it, but, you know, why have it sitting in a box? I've had most of these parts sitting in a box for over a year, and I finally was like, hey, why don't I put all this stuff on the engine and, you know, figure out what I need to take the next step. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I'm about 1 or 2 steps closer to getting this 318 running in this car. It is kind of difficult because I have a couple little odds and ends to do on the Model A, and I'm still trying to focus on the 318. And in the back of my mind, I still have the Power Wagon, and I really want to get started on that. I had a few hiccups along the way, so that's sort of sitting right now. But like I said, thanks for watching. I appreciate all the views and subscribers. And if you learned something, that's great. If not, oh well. If you just come to see what I'm up to and watch the channel, that's totally fine. I'm just a backyard mechanic trying to build a hot rod. So, you know, expectations are low and output is even lower. We got a lot of mottos around here, and I don't know. See you next time.